I
Cool.
don't know where y'all are at, but it's mad hot out here. Ooh.
Good luck, sir. All right, so the recording is started, so let's jump on into it. Um, Good evening, everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. It is always nice to see everyone for our fireside chats. So this time we have Jerell, who is a game designer at ArenaNet, here to talk about MMO design. So Jerell, if you want to give like a brief intro to yourself.
Yeah. If you didn't hear, my name is Jerell. I'm a content designer on Guild Wars 3 on at ArenaNet. Previously, I was working on Guild Wars 2. Um, Worked at a few other companies. I worked at Ubisoft for a brief stint and indie company called Team Cat RPG. Um, I did open world events for Guild Wars 2 on the 6th expansion, along with the 5th expansion. Um, for anyone who plays the game, I was part of the Garden Eternity team for the Only Way patch that came out. I did the mini dungeon for that, along with a few other items.
Okay, nice. So, when I reached out to you about talking about MMOs, I remember you saying, or when you first joined this, I remember you saying that you were a big Final Fantasy 14 fan. You're working on MMOs, you're playing MMOs in your free time. So I feel like you have some opinions. Who is your favorite FF14 raid boss?
Oh, okay. So I got two answers for you. I got the easy go-to answer, right? And then I got a favorite modern answer. So all-time favorite is the Bowl of Embers trial with Ifrit. It
Okay.
was fairly early in the game. It's the first trial you do, but it was just a really enjoyable experience. Especially, I'm sure part of it is nostalgia, but having a couple friends that were still playing the game at the time, being able to just sit down, wait for them that experience, going into it having like a reasonable challenge, and it also does a pretty good job setting the tone for how a lot of the boss fights are created in that game and how they develop going forward. It kind of gets you used to don't stand in bad as a simple concept inside of MMOs, especially in Final Fantasy 14.
Don't
And
stand in
then
the fire.
especially, yeah, literally, right? They have this massive red circle that's about to just light up, and so it was dope. And then they also had the extreme version. So despite coming to the game fairly late compared to everybody else, I think I started playing in like 2020. I sat down in queue and waited for like an hour for people to try the extreme version just to say I did it, and it was a good time having the elevated challenge. Everything was just moving a lot faster, and then a few extra mechanics. So that's my favorite of all time. But my favorite one from more recent expansions is the Hooded Headsman. This is from the Dawn Trail post MSQ. They had a encounter in one of the dungeons in which they actually separate all four players, and each of them has to defeat their own boss. And that one was really fun.
That's cool.
And yeah. In general, Final Fantasy is a more collaborative effort. They tend to rely on the experiences of everybody. If anyone makes a mistake in the group, then it kind of shortens it. But comparatively, that one allowed individuals to shine, which was really cool. It was a nice contrast to the normal design principles. Because everyone
Interesting.
fighting their 1v1, if you finish quick enough, you can actually go and help other people out. And so, if you have a good healer, they finish up first. They're just sitting down, buffing whoever else is going. Or if one of your DPS is finished, they go help the healer out. Tank
Yeah.
finishes, they go cover the healer. And so it creates a fun experience.
Or they just watch and be like, nah, bro, I did my job. You handle your business.
City moat and just watch. Yeah. Oh my god.
That's exactly why people be like, nah, tomorrow play a one player game. You don't know how to act like a team. So,
Yeah.
as a designer, like, cause it, like, just like you're saying, it's like, yo, it's a thing that you do both in and out of work. Is there something specific about MMOs that appeals to you that you feel like you can't get working in other game genres?
Yeah. One of the things that's really nice about MMOs, and not to say that any team is particularly small, but with MMOs, everything is so dedicated to each specific portion that exists within the game. So, there's teams dedicated to the PvP and ensuring people have a good experience there. There's people dedicated to high end PvE, whether that's like your dungeons, your raids, your trials, and whatever game you're playing. Or the people who are more focused on the story, and then the more casual content, whether that's just, fishing or crafting or something. And so being able to just give everyone a little bit of everything, because I'm as a player, I'm one of those people that I enjoy engaging with a lot of different mechanics at a surface level rather than going super in depth with one or another. And so it is cool being able to provide that for everybody.
Okay, so obviously, I got the questions written out, but like, as I just want to jump just because you mentioned it. So you mentioned that there's like, there's like teams dedicated to each section of the game, and there's like, a variety of systems and mechanics that you can touch. So like, are there some systems that you sort of enjoy working on more than others?
Yeah, the system I enjoy working on the most, or the content that I enjoy playing as most as a player, which is not the case for everybody all the time, but for me it definitely is. When I played like Destiny 2, for example, the stuff that I really enjoyed were the dungeons and the raids, and then same thing in Final Fantasy, the dungeons and the raids. And so working on the more bespoke content like that has been a really enjoyable experience. So like working on that mini dungeon in Guild Wars 2 was, I think, one of the highlights of my career, even if it was comparatively small. When you look at some of the other things we do in our title, it was cool
Yeah.
being able to create an experience, setting up mechanics from the ground up, and slowly introduce them and twist them for the players. They were kind of going through that engagement, and so it was a great time.
Nice, interesting. So obviously, you're talking about your sort of focus on like building for like a specific subset of player. Do you ever feel like there's certain like times when like certain subsets of players don't get like enough targeted towards them, or how do you sort of feel like the team manages that balance?
Yeah, it's a bit difficult. The game industry as a whole, it's I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, everything is done for profit. And
Right. Yeah.
so, and you know, from a high level, obviously, the devs that are involved in it absolutely love things, but it's always a priority of whatever studio you're at to try and make sure that they're still making money. And so, a lot of that ended up coming from the casual audience. But in the same breath, a lot of the higher end players and a lot of the times the devs that are working on the game are players who took it very seriously. Like, especially when you look at games like, and again, this doesn't apply to specifically MMOs, but like League of Legends, if you look at like a lot of the devs that are on League, they are players that were like diamond or higher in terms of elo, and so they're people very very dedicated to the balance of the game. And so in turn, I feel like it's a bit harder to compile to balance things for the higher end of PvP specifically in a lot of games. But
Yeah.
in general, I still feel like it gets a lot of love. Like one of my coworkers, a dude named Roy, was huge in the World v World on Guild Wars 2 and just absolutely loved it. And so he ended up getting hired, and that's been like his huge priority since he's been at the company. Is just trying to make the best experience he can for PvP players.
Nice. It is really cool to see that like that's been a sort of recurring thing as well with ArenaNet team. Is like, oh cool, we've got someone who has the skills and is very much interested in like a particular part of what we do. So like let's bring them on to like support that experience.
Yeah, 100%. They do a phenomenal job with that.
So just because obviously we're talking about like the sort of size and scale of MMO that you're dealing with, and like how that's obviously what you're commonly seeing is different from like other, even like in live service games it's pretty different. How do you sort of deal with building systems that scale for the kind of player count that MMOs are seeing?
That's the thing that I've actually really been learning. Because I mean, I started a guild on Guild Wars in 2023,
Yeah.
and they started me off with fairly small stuff like base spawn. But as I was continuing to kind of make content, I wanted to challenge both myself and the players that I was creating content for, and it's hard. It is really hard to try and find that middle ground for everyone, and so it kind of it depends on a couple of things. The one of the largest factors is how long the game has been around for. In general, when you have a game like Guild Wars that's been around for 10 plus years, or Final Fantasy that's been around for 10 plus years, or WoW that's been around for like 20 years, you
Yeah.
can kind of give players a bit bigger challenges, right? It's a bit more acceptable because players have a much better understanding. And if there are newer players, there is kind of a common understanding that you're going to be playing with veterans and they're going to take the time to teach you. That's one of the things that people really enjoy about MMOs is the community, right? And so
Yeah.
it is okay to kind of create that higher end content. But one of the other factors that goes along with that is where you're developing the content at in the game itself. Um, for Guild Wars with the open world content, there's a bit lower of a bar of difficulty that we look for in terms of things. I'm not trying to challenge people who are just grinding out to get their materials or get reputation and for a given group the biggest challenge
Right.
in the world. So the mini dungeon was a great place where I was able to kind of find a nice balance with difficulty, where I was able to amp it up a little bit. And so you'll see it in places like that. And then similarly, things that are not story bound, you can very easily kind of make a bit more difficult. Sometimes players, especially when they're just going through the story of an MMO and it can be fairly long, aren't looking to sit down and have to hit retry 3 or 4 times on a given quest or restart from the nearest checkpoint. And so
Right.
things outside of the story are good grounds to try and balance it. But It also does depend on what the intended design is for whatever piece of content, and I hope this isn't getting too in depth.
No,
I'm
no,
trying
this is
to
great.
address the nuance of it. Okay, perfect. So yeah, there's also kind of what your intended mechanics are. So a lot of times, again, going back to Final Fantasy, they do more group based mechanics where if everyone does it correct and perfect, and if anyone messes up, then you're all doing it again. Everyone has to know it as a whole. There isn't as much opportunity for individual players to shine, which
Yeah,
is a good thing and a bad thing, right? It creates it so. For example, Destiny, another game I absolutely love. It is fairly individual based. I've gone through raids like for the first time of people who've done it 10, 20 times over, and it'll be like two or three people that are like, let us handle the mechanics, you just kill ads, we will just do everything else. And so games like Final Fantasy don't really have things like that. And so knowing what your game's principles are in terms of development, you knowing
yeah,
whether or not your game tends to focus on the group or the individual is also another way that you're trying to try and balance it out. So a lot of times for open world content on Guild Wars 2, where we're not looking for hard failure conditions, just ways to kind of throw in extra challenges for players. And
yeah,
sometimes there are hard failures, obviously, but we in general tend to avoid those in the open world. And so not letting players chew their own foot off, right? Sort of thing. And so yeah, it really does just depend. So you have to kind of be aware of the different circumstances that you're setting up for players.
okay, that's cool. So when you're sort of deciding on the sort of like different updates that's happening, and like obviously there's like small like minor patches, seasonal, there's major updates. What kind of conversations going into like what kinds of content and how much of it?
So for the most part, that's handled by production and leadership. For me, not a whole lot goes into that outside of deciding like my personal scope.
Right.
Um, but to just kind of talk on it from what I do understand, the largest things are the timeline and player expectations. For example, with Guild Wars, expansions are just expected to be a lot larger, right? So those are
Yeah.
the pieces of content where you're seeing 2 to 3 maps come out at a given point in time, along with 1 or 2 metas, multiple, maybe a dozen story chapters,
Okay.
and some other side content. Whereas our quarterly releases, like the only way out, the patch that I worked on, it only came with a single map. It came with a meta for the map and a few other pieces of content, along with I believe it was like 5 or 6 story chapters. So not as much, but
Right.
it really does depend. Final Fantasy goes super hard with their expansions, right? But they don't release them in the same cadence that we do.
Right.
We are the last few years we've been on like a yearly release schedule with Guild Wars, whereas Final Fantasy will do it every few years, but they also do these large patches in between that might come out with an extra dungeon or so. And so I do think it's a kind of a communicative experience where as long as you're telling your players what to expect, I think whatever you scope for it is reasonable, especially because I feel like given the age we're in of communication, people are capable of directly talking with the devs, and I think there's a better understanding that these people have lives and aren't going to be working 14-hour shifts for certain stuff.
Gotcha. Okay, so you think it's really more about the team just sort of saying like, all right, cool, like here are our resources, what cadence do we want, and just sort of building the player expectations of like what will be happening in like the different like content updates.
Yeah, 100%. I do think as a player, it is always exciting seeing the larger releases, but obviously those come with a bit more time. And when you see MMOs with teams like Guild Wars or Final Fantasy or WoW, the one thing that we do is stagger our teams. So I'll be working on a quarterly release while someone else is working on the expansion at the same time. And so it gives the opportunity for larger content releases to come out because that is the thing that's most exciting as a player, right? Those massive releases.
Right. Have you ever like jumped between teams, like working on like say something for like like the quarterly release and the annual release?
Yeah, so not wholeheartedly jumping from one to the other, but like every once in a while, maybe somebody will need some help and they'll hop over and help me out with something on the quarterly release while working on the yearly release, or vice versa. Somebody might need some help, and so maybe I'll just pick up one of their pieces of content, or vice versa, they'll pick up one of my pieces of content, or sometimes we'll even just sit down on a call and hash out how to get something working. So it is largely collaborative.
Gotcha. Okay, but so like there's obviously times when you'll help one another, but for the most part, teams are like separated and being responsible for like different like release cadence projects.
Yeah. Outside of narrative, narrative has to communicate a whole bunch because we want to make sure we have a reasonable continuity between everything from a quarterly release to whatever annual release is being worked on at the same time.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So like do you feel like narrative is the people that are like most part of dealing with everyone?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I have not worked on narrative too much. I've written some like starter dialogue the narrative goes back
Yeah.
over and fixes, or sat down in meetings to help brainstorm. But
Yeah.
from my experience in working with the narrative designers, it seems like they are the most spread about. They are working on every release at the same time, essentially. And while they may be one that they're primarily assigned to, in some
Right.
way, shape, or form, they're still communicating very closely with the other narrative designers. Because again, you need to have that continuity between each release and make sure everyone's on the same page of what's going on.
Okay, interesting. Actually, well, now I'm curious. Who do you actually sort of like interface most with outside of your like fellow content designers?
Yeah, so the way that we organized the teams on Guild Wars 2, at least, it
Yeah.
was largely everyone that was going to be required for whatever map I was working on. So we had a team with like our producer, our environment artist, whoever our audio designers were. Typically the composers were fairly self-contained, but usually the audio lead was in there with us. Um, Prop artists, UI artists. So it was a handful of us, and then they'd have like a narrative designer and like a writer assigned to us. And so it was usually like a small bunch that you would interact with. And given the staggered nature of the releases, it tended to be a lot of overlap on who you were working with. So I'm working on, the second release for EX5, and then the third release. Usually I'm working with the same team for both of those, because the team that's been working on the sixth expansion has been working on it all together.
Interesting. Okay. Are there any people that you don't get to work with much that you'd really like to like a chance to like sort of collaborate with more?
Cinematics. I don't get to interact with the cinematics team too much, and they're fairly self-contained. Where there's obviously the people doing the visuals for it, whether it's the character or the props, along with the people doing the audio. And it's really cool seeing what they do and what they come up with. And usually we just end up getting like updates from them. But it would be dope to find more opportunities for it. But there just always isn't the scope for cinematics in certain pieces of content. So
Interesting. Oh, we got Stu who works in cinematics. Who's like, oh, say more. Tell me what you like from me. um, so actually, because we're talking about like like if the thing that's come up is like like the scope and like the projects in these teams. So MMOs are these persistent growing worlds. There's always the team adding more to it. Do you feel like there's some sort of unique challenges to sort of like building in this environment where like there's already like like 800 maps, and now I got to figure out like the 800 first map to add, like keeping it fresh.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things is, especially coming onto a team for a game like Guild Wars, is there's just so much lore, right? There's Guild Wars 1 and X amount of years of content, and then there's Guild Wars 2 and then X amount of years of content. And so just trying to get caught up. Like when I first started working on at ArenaNet on Guild Wars, well, I was just watching like 2-3 hour lore videos from people on YouTube to just make sure I wasn't messing anything up, right? And it was a good time, but I think that was one of the biggest challenges, was just trying to get acquainted to that. And then also, and something I kind of mentioned before, was player expectations, right?
Yeah.
I hadn't played an immense amount of Guild Wars before I started playing. I'd played it, but and I've got like 1,000 hours in Destiny. I got like 1,000 hours in Final Fantasy. And I definitely didn't have that type of time in Guild Wars. And
Yeah.
so, adjusting to the expectations of the player base, I wanted to make sure I was making things that Guild Wars players would want to enjoy. And so, I think that was one of the other bigger challenges. And I feel like that's, from my experience, a fairly common experience among people who are starting on different MMOs. Because there is kind of a general understood expectation of content as it comes into different games from the player base. When you look at Final Fantasy, and thankfully they're recently planning to switch it up, they had the 2-minute meta that came along for all the buffs that were going around on every character class. And so in turn, they started designing bosses around that. And so any content designer, any encounters designer that came onto their team needed to know about this 2-minute meta that existed, so they could design their boss mechanics to revolve around that, right? And so
Yeah.
it is largely making sure you're understanding the player expectations and what they're kind of looking for.
Do you ever find there's times when like the player expectations sort of clash with like what you'd like to do as a designer?
Not really, honestly. I feel like, especially I still play a lot of games, so I'm not very disconnected from the game community in that sense.
Right.
Because it's very easy to end up just on the developer side of things or on the consumer side of things and not really be able to see the other perspective. But
Right.
I play a whole bunch of games, so it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, I can see how players are tired of this. Let me see how I can switch it up, or I can see how players are you're looking for something new or something different in this type of regard, or maybe enjoyed this piece of content. How can I expand upon it? Right. One of the things that I tried to do for the mini dungeon for the patch I worked on was look at things that were enjoyed in the sixth expansion release and see what mechanics I could take and try and expand upon. a little bit. So
Yeah, like a team-based first-person shooter mode, like a certain game that starts with D and ends with Destiny 2.
yeah, that would be sick if only.
Um, so are there any systems or mechanics that you'd really like to see MMOs, like not specific to Guild Wars 3, but just in general, like experiment
Yeah,
more with?
yeah. One of the things that I've been discussing a lot with just peers and friends has been social systems. In the game industry as a whole, there's been this massive shift I've noticed with the way social systems are set up. And I got a lot of friends playing like WoW Classic, for example, and um, the game industry as a whole has kind of shifted towards, and I know part of it is technological limits at the time, but I do think
Yeah,
part of it is also consumer preference. Is the game industry has shifted to being able to pick things up and put them down very easily, and I
yeah,
think that's a good thing. Obviously, there's a lot of limitations people have in terms of time and commitment they can make to games, but um, in turn, I think there's a bit of a disconnect that happens. Like and this isn't MMO specific, but like Halo or Call of Duty back in the day, you'd be sitting in a lobby and you'd be sitting in the same lobby for like 8 hours with the same like 8 people, right? And
yeah.
sometimes it sucked. Sometimes you ran into the worst people on the internet, and sometimes you ran into like really cool people, and you just ended up becoming friends with them. And uh, MMOs specifically, you notice with the LFG systems that come out, and like WoW with the Raid Finder or in Duty Finder on Final Fantasy, it's very easy to kind of just queue up for a session, play through the content that you need to, and leave. And I think that's a good thing, but I do think it's a little lost. The joy that comes from like being in a hub city and being able to talk to people and meet up with a couple people, join a random person's guild, and there are people still doing that, but I feel like there aren't a lot of social systems supporting that, and that's something I would love to see experimented with, seeing companies create systems to try and engage with random people a bit more and make that an enjoyable experience. And obviously there's some guardrails that kind of need to be done. It is
Right.
again, it can be a very toxic environment very easily, but it would be nice to see that kind of expanded upon.
Are there any, like, in particular, obviously not something you like specifically pitched to Guild Wars, but you're like, yo,
Yeah.
like this is a thing I would really like to try in terms of social systems.
I The thing is, I don't know what the proper solution is, because social systems isn't something I've delved too heavily into. But I
Right.
don't think the answer would be just getting rid of these LFG systems, because I think those are super important. I do
Right.
think I don't know. I feel like a way to safely engage with randoms, because I think that is a part of it. And I find myself, as a black person on the internet, it is a coin flip, right? Whether or not who you run into is absolutely insane or not. And so it's very easy. Yeah, finding a way to safely engage with people would be the way to do it. So I would want to see something to try and create more guardrails for those interactions, because I think more people would be willing to engage with randoms if they didn't have to worry about these horribly negative experiences. And I mean, you see it a lot with like women playing Valorant, where they just don't even want to risk turning their mics on because these dudes are so horribly misogynistic, right?
Oh man, I wish my boy Nick, who used to work on Valorant, was here. I'd be like, "Is that true? Is that what you've done?"
I mean, and it's not the devs' fault. They're doing everything they can. I think they've set up a voice report system to try and skirt these things, but it's just it's a thing that occurs, and so
Yeah. No. Um. So if you're actually, because you mentioned like the sort of onboarding experience that you had, like sort of coming onto this team. So like you're bringing a
Mhm.
designer onto a team. Like actually, let's say you're the senior now. You're bringing in like a new designer. What are like the golden rules that you want to tell them? Like, yo, this is kind of like what you need to know to get started.
Yeah, I think the largest thing, and it's something I kind of mentioned before, is being familiar with your audience, knowing which the player expectation is of the title that you're working on. It sets the standards for the content you make, right? Like, knowing whether or not certain content is allowed to be difficult, knowing how certain mechanics are typically set up to make sure these affordances are proper for players when they're approaching, right? If red barrels explode everywhere in this game, and you walk up to this barrel and you decided to put it down and it doesn't explode, then it creates a weird player experience, right? This disjointing. And so making sure you're aware of what your audience expects of the game, the common things that are done, is huge. Um,
Okay.
the second thing I would say is play other games. There are so many cool games that are out right now. Even just, and I've referenced a lot of games from different genres in this, because I feel like there's a lot to be taken from all these different titles, whether it's the experience that players are having on them or mechanics that are being implemented in different sorts of ways, different evolutions that are coming from all these different studios that are working on things.
World Wars Kart Racer? Is that what's coming?
Yeah, a Mario Kart spinoff. Yeah. And then the last thing is, and this is a bit more design focused, is testing your content as much as you can. Um, Obviously, there is at some level, the more you test your content, the more disillusioned you become with it. You may not appreciate the work that you've put into it as much as you have,
Right.
or you may not be able to recognize flaws in it. But nonetheless, I still think it's super important to just run through your content as many times as possible. Sometimes there's pretty blaring flaws that could be fairly obvious that you would not have noticed if you hadn't tested it pretty extensively. And granted, there's not always the time for it. That's just how things go sometimes. But yeah,
Right.
just running it through it as much as possible.
Do you sort of have any sort of opposite rules of like, yo, like absolutely don't do X, Y, and Z?
Oh, that's a good question. Huh? Um, One of the things that I've noticed from some like when I was in college, for example, there are people who have more avant-garde taste as it comes to games. They maybe play more indie titles and more obscure titles that maybe are a bit more abrasive for players. And one of the things that I think is just a bad habit is the you just don't get it mentality on the dev end. Trying to make sure that you're genuinely listening, because it's very easy to come up with what might be the most genius mechanic you've ever come up with, but if players don't know how to engage with it, then it doesn't really matter. And then I think in the same breath, and this might sound like a contrast to what I just said, but knowing what feedback you're getting when people say things. Sometimes the feedback you're getting from people is not always what they actually mean. Maybe they say, this mechanic is too hard. But when you've had other people run through it, it doesn't always hit that same level of difficulty. Maybe it's just that it's not being explained properly, right? So being able to know what you're actually hearing when people are giving you feedback is the important bit. Being able to dissect the important information out. And so, yeah, don't always just take everything at face value is I think one of the biggest don'ts. Uh, Even sometimes not even just from players. It may be a lead or something has an abrasive reaction to something, and it's just maybe there's something in specific that you could adjust to change it differently. So being aware of that as well.
Maybe the manager just doesn't see my genius.
Yeah, it's definitely finding that mid ground, right? Like,
He's like, all right, we're gonna be deleting that man's ArenaNet application.
just get rid of the whole thing.
He's just like, nope, not letting him in here. Make sure there's no questions I skipped. Oh yeah, so you mentioned you work a lot of time on like the sort of content, the dungeons. Are there any sort of aspects for like building content for MMOs that you would love a chance to spend more time working on that maybe you haven't got a chance to do much for?
Yeah, the one thing that I did work on that I mentioned was the mini dungeon. I definitely would want to get more into instanced content like that in MMOs.
Okay.
It's a really fun experience being able to craft the one thing I did make. And as I had mentioned before, I had to keep in mind it was for open world, so there was a certain high bar of difficulty that I didn't want to really surpass. I wanted to make sure that again there was no hard points of failure, which is something you can kind of expect in a dungeon, right? If you
Right.
wipe on a boss, you're going back to wherever the last checkpoint was, and you're running back. Hopefully, you've cleared the mobs, and if not, then you may have to clear some extra mobs, sort of thing. And so, being able to experiment with that difficulty a bit more, I think, would be super fun. And again, I mentioned Destiny 2 dungeons were some of my favorite pieces of content. Final Fantasy dungeons are my favorite content, and so being able to draw inspiration from those and create stuff that kind of is allowed to hit that higher bar of difficulty, I think would be a really fun experience.
Okay. Are there any areas of like working on content for MMOs that you're like, obviously like it's your job, you'll make sure like you'll get your work done, but like if it's your preference, you'd probably avoid that.
PvP. PvP. I love PvP and I love the people who love PvP. I am not good at it. And
Ah,
and not that I don't think I wouldn't enjoy it. I think there are some things that I would really like doing from it. For like, for example, level design for it, I think would be pretty fun. But I just know that I am going to mess up the meta, right? If I touch PvP, I'm gonna ruin it because I
oh,
don't.
okay.
There's not many games that I play PvP at that high of a level, and so I
I
wouldn't
see.
want to do that to the audience, right?
Now
Like,
I see what you mean. Is that like there are certain things that you feel like you've got the headspace, like this naturally clicks with you, and like
yeah,
you want to sort of like, yo, this is my bag, this is what I know. Like
yeah,
let me run where I'm fastest, and not like put me in an area
exactly.
where I'm like, that's not my expertise.
I'm gonna stay in my little bag because there's no reason for me to touch PvP and absolutely ruin it. Especially, I watched, for example, there's this streamer named Flats who plays high elo Overwatch, and you can when you hear him talk about the game, you can see there are moments where there are things that if so a high level player had been designing something, it would have been fairly obvious to them, and I know I'd be making those mistakes, sort of thing, right?
Right. All right, so I think that covers all of my questions, which is next. It is time to go through questions from the chat. All right, so let's make sure I'm starting at the beginning and working my way in down. Um, the dev being sweats is crazy. Yo, Mia, like, you gotta have a few developers who are really hardcore about the game. I'm
I
making
know.
sure.
In relation to that comment, on Riot's website, certain job positions they like put it down as a requirement that like you need to at least be diamond elo for a given job, right? Like
Yeah,
it is certain games that are very competitive like that, they require you to be a sweat.
yeah. I know back when the only game they had was League of Legends, they were like, yo, man, what's your level? Like, what's your rank? I
Yeah,
know
literally.
they dialed back on that once, they became Riot Games plural and not, League of
Riot
Legends
game.
company, Riot Game.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do believe for certain like positions they still have that like all right, like expectation of like, no, what is your like competency level in this game?
Yeah.
Or in similar games. All right, so going down from the all right, so question from Charles: is there any work that you've like built that you regret in hindsight?
Yeah. um I try to take things with a very positive outlook. There's always the hindsight is 2020 sort of thing. But it there have definitely been a couple pieces, and I'm not gonna down myself too much by naming this specific content, but there's been a couple pieces of content where I realized either I didn't explain the mechanics well enough for players to really get it, and it wasn't a matter of like I like in some cases I had literally just not heard it from players, but in some cases I just didn't know how to explain it. And I think
Right.
that's one of the biggest skills that you kind of learn to develop as you're continuing working on games. And I think that's the largest difference between like a really good game designer and a really bad one is knowing how much you need to explain to the player. Because obviously you don't want to handhold, but like sometimes there's a time where it's appropriate to just literally blatantly put up what the mechanic is in words on screen. And so I think there are some times where I think I could have done that and I did not. Or times that I could have explained things better a bit more subtly. But again, it with the limitations I had as a designer at the time, I don't think I would have ever known to. But
Right.
if I ever had the time to go back, I would definitely want to expand upon the tutorial I have for these mechanics, sort of thing.
Actually, some related question coming from David. Anything you'd want to do differently in an instance experience?
Uh, David, do you mean differently based off of things that I've designed, or just based off of current standards for instances? Because I haven't made a whole bunch of instances at this point. Most of my content has been open world.
But you've played a lot of instances.
Current standards. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like something that I really enjoyed in Destiny that I think was done really well at some points in time, and it had mixed reviews at other points, was content assigning you roles, sort of thing. A lot of the dungeons would be like, okay, well, this person can see certain things, this person can interact with certain type of things, and I think some more of that in less FPS MMOs, I think would be kind of cool. Kind of forcing players to kind of take roles, and I think it also creates a nice switch up for players where it's very easy as a healer, while it is high cortisol gaming where you're trying to keep everybody's health bars up, to just be pressing, your standard rotation. And I think instance content is a great opportunity to try and find a way to switch that up where you have other things to do besides hit the enemies and keep your team alive.
I was gonna say, I feel like isn't the main job of healers to just yell at their team for
Yeah.
not making bad choices? It's just like, nah, bro,
Why
you
are
should
you
actually.
standing there?
Yeah, it's like, nah, bro, stop standing in the fire. Maybe if you stopped throwing all of that, aggro, you'd still be alive. Like, let
Why,
like.
why are you at DPS standing next to the tank buster? Walk away. Like,
I see fire. I get out the way.
yeah, literally.
Um, question from Jason: sharded open world, good or bad?
Sorry, let me get that one more time. I was trying to see if I could find it in the chat.
So sharded open world, do you feel like good or bad in your personal experience or just personal preference?
When you say sharded, is in like separate maps, like each XYZ area is its own area, and then there's another one.
Hey, he means like phased open world.
I actually don't know what you mean. I'd love to, if you don't mind explaining it.
Actually, Jason, I'm gonna. Yep, I was invite to speak. Yeah, you're muted.
Oh, my bad. I'm not Jason. I was just going to speak on behalf of the phased open world, though. Like, you have these areas, like, I'll speak to WoW because that's what I play, but where you may start in the zone. It looks a certain way for me because I haven't done X amount of quests. And then when I do those quests, then it phases to another like version of that area. So that's one example of like that phased experience. Yeah.
No, I know 100% what you mean. I actually really like those. Personally, in terms of games, one of the things I look for the most are narratives, and I think that's a good way to sell a narrative. Is XYZ quest has been completed, and now this church has collapsed for you on your screen, and anyone else is not. And I think those kind of moments are huge in an MMO, especially like nothing's more fun in those type of circumstances than having a player that's new to the game come through and has the church fallen for you sort of thing yet? Waiting for that type of moment. And so I think, I'm a big fan of it. I think it's good.
Nice. All right, making sure I'm going back up so I don't miss any. All right, so questions from Mia. So we're just going to read them in order. So first, has there been a time where an event or content release was too difficult? How did you handle scaling back that challenge?
Thankfully, none of my content has been too difficult. In our experience, actually, no, I should take that back. There was one piece of content that I released that I think it's got like a 25% success rate. So I should not say that at all. Yeah,
good.
But yeah, how do you handle scaling back the challenge? Guild Wars 2 had really good systems where we were very easily on the back end able to quickly adjust some numbers. But when it comes to mechanics shifts, if the mechanics themselves are too difficult, that tends to be a lot more. But yeah, most, at least I know our company, and I'm assuming a lot of other companies, I'd be surprised if they didn't have the tech to just like, oh, this boss's health bar is too much or their damage is too high. And so being able to adjust that, and I mean, even just a hot fix is super doable for a lot of times. But when it comes to content before it gets released, I know this isn't exactly the question you asked, but I feel like it's still adjacent enough to when content tends to be too difficult. A lot of times, my experience, it's that people are confused on the mechanics. When people know what they're doing, executing it isn't the hardest thing in the world. Sometimes it takes a little bit of mastery to get used to it, some repetition to, get the reps in, sort of thing. But a lot of times when people are experiencing difficult mechanics, it's just you don't know what to do, right? I mean, not MMO specific, but Elden Ring. The waterfowl dance, Melania's like big attack that absolutely blows everyone out the water the first time they do it. There's like a really simple pen that once you know, you can dodge it every time super easily, taking literally no damage at all. And so but they don't explain anything in that game. But once you've seen someone do it once, you just practice it a few times and you can do it continually.
It's funny because you talk about sorry, go first.
No, go ahead.
I would say it's just because I'm thinking about when you mentioned like building dungeons and like planning for difficulty, because it makes me think of Yuji Horii, who's like the creative lead on Dragon Quest, and he's been working on Dragon Quest literally since the first one. And in an interview, he's like, someone asked him about challenges on the new games, and he said making things too difficult, because he's like, like as long as I've been working on Dragon Quest, you think I'd have a sense for like, for like these multiple decades, I'd have a sense for like the difficulty. But he's like, nah, like my first time out, I still make every dungeon too difficult. He's like, I still do.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Second question from Mia. How much does community feedback impact what is going to be implemented into the game? How does the team balance implementing feedback without pandering?
How much community feedback goes into what's being implemented is the answer is a lot. On Guild Wars, we try to listen to the community as much as possible. after my more recent releases, I even worked up the nerve to go and look at Reddit and see what they had to say. And yeah, and, some of it is negative, but in the same breath, some of it is just you can tell when someone is giving feedback in good faith. It's pretty easy to be like, no, this person does enjoy Guild Wars. They're just like upset that XYZ keeps happening. And so trying to literally going and reading their feedback, right? If somebody's taking the time to put their feelings out into the world, there is opportunity for you to learn something. And so it impacts it a lot. Largely, we try and listen to what people are enjoying and don't enjoy and what we can change. And then how does the balance team implement feedback without pandering? I feel like this kind of leads back into the good faith thing. A lot of times there are people who are very upset about certain things, and obviously not every game is for everyone. And so sometimes it's just like the thing that you want may not get into the game, and that's okay. And so just knowing, again, if there's an identity built for the game, there's existing standards for stuff, and somebody's asking for something that's just way out of left field. And I know you were joking about it before, but like if somebody's like, "Yo, I want Mario Kart in Guild Wars," like I'm sorry, bro, that's not happening, right? Like maybe we try to make like a little mini thing, but like that's the sort of the mid ground, right? It doesn't feel like pandering if you're not ruining the identity of what this thing is in order to change for something specific.
Well, fine, just shoot me down. Okay, I'll see how it is.
I'm sorry, bro. I didn't mean to break your heart.
And then next question, also from Mia. How would you implement cinematics into design work that you do? Because you did mention you're loving the chance to work with cinematics team more.
Yeah, one of the things I really like in, for example, Borderlands, is even for like smaller enemies, when they're introducing a boss, I think it'd be really cool to just like, oh, it's the big guy. Give him a specific name because we tend to do that anyway in Guild Wars. And just give him a small little intro, even if it's just the camera zooming in and him doing a pose. It kind of creates a bit more of an identity with these enemies and something you can kind of enjoy. And a lot of times these enemies have dialogue, right? So it can help build out their personality a bit more. The cinematics team does an amazing job at every company, right? Helping create more moments for these characters and making them feel more human. And so I think even for open world content, and not everything, but if I have a more bespoke boss that's being created, giving them a moment to introduce themselves would kind of create a moment.
Nice. All right. So I'm still working my way down. I like seeing that there's even more questions I haven't got to yet. This is great. Keep them coming. Next question. I know you said that not to design a game for yourself, but have you ever snuck in something that was like a bit more self-indulgent?
In terms of content, not super. Obviously, you're going to take inspiration from games you've worked on. So maybe the mechanic I'm implementing isn't super common in Guild Wars, but maybe it's something you see a bit more in Final Fantasy or Destiny. And I might do something, obviously not literally the same, but similar to or inspired by. But I tend to try and give the Guild Wars twist to the things that I'm working on. And so not super self-indulgent. The place that I try to indulge is in some of the text that I do manage to get through the game. There was a title that we put in the game. And it was around the time that like elite employee meme was going around, and so I managed to get that title snuck into the game. And so I try to, and it's one of the things I also enjoy as a player is feeling like the content you enjoy is being seen. And so I try and sneak in as many references to media that I enjoy into things. And so whether it's just like the name of an NPC being a reference to something, or the title of something being a reference to something else, or an achievement name, I try to make players feel seen in that way.
Nice. All right, next. Does the narrative directly affect the game design in open world events? Is there a feature in these events that gets scrapped because it conflicts with the narrative?
Easy answer to the second question, yes. There are plenty of times in which the narrative does not support a mechanic that is being developed, and it completely just gets thrown out the window. We at ArenaNet, we do have like documentation, and so narrative goes over that. And so if something gets vetoed quickly because of that, it is an uncommon to see.
Do you have
so in turn, yes, the narrative
for this documentation to just change the narrative to fit your mechanic?
There are points in time which the inverse will happen, where like we'll come up with a mechanic and they're willing to change the narrative a little bit to make it make sense. But yeah, it sometimes we'll get the narrative veto. So in turn, narrative does very directly affect the things that are in the game, especially because certain mechanics just wouldn't make sense based off of lore that exists. And thankfully the narrative designers of our company are amazing, and so they'll sit down and work with you a lot of times. So maybe it doesn't get like a hard veto and you just completely throw the idea out. They'll try and rework it to try and make it make more sense within the context of the game.
So when you make that dungeon that's talking about summoning a giant robot, they just walk up to your desk. They're like, "Come on, son, you know,
Throw it
you know what I'm buying. Why you even put this in my inbox, bro?"
Go ahead and clock out for me.
Here we go. Next question from Jason. Was Guild Wars 2 PvP based on DAOC?
I don't know. I don't do PvP at all. I'm sorry, Jason. That I was not joking when I say that's the area. I am not touching it with the 10-foot pole. I leave PvP alone because I know I'm just gonna ruin it. So I would not be able to tell you too much. I'm sure there was probably some inspiration though. Some of our devs have been in the game industry for a while. One of my coworkers worked on EverQuest, so I would be surprised if there wasn't some inspiration from Dark Age of Camelot.
I was like, yeah, man, some of those MMO heads have been around for a while.
Yeah.
What next one? Is Jerell the Tamer designed off of you?
I don't think so. If someone did that and didn't say anything to me, that would be news. So,
all right, moving on down. When feedback aligns with something you wanted, but leadership went a different route, have you had any opportunities to get that changed?
yeah, thankfully, I feel like our leadership at our company is super, super open. I've been pretty lucky to have leads that are willing to let me push back on feedback that they give. And our leadership does a very good job listening to player feedback. So it's very seldom that I've had an experience where I wanted something, players wanted something, and leadership said no. I would actually say it's never happened, right? So I've been very thankful that our leadership is super, super open to listening to. And so, and even if they're initially maybe a bit abrasive to it, maybe they're feeling they feel strongly against it. If I give good reasoning, especially because ultimately at the end of the day, everyone just wants to make a good game. So as long as I'm like player focused in my reasoning and logic, they're more than willing to change their opinion in a lot of those types of situations.
Nice. Actually, I just realized, yeah, Jeroy's not here, and Jeroy's on the narrative team. Yo, man, the next time you get a veto, you gotta text him, be like, "Yo, come on, son, you help me out, bro. Like, you supposed to be my boy."
Just change their minds, dude. I swear it's
Yeah.
a great idea.
It's
I'm a genius, bro. I got
Yeah,
this.
I'm a genius. Honest. I'm thinking on a higher plane.
Elevated thinking.
My third eye is open. Let me scroll back up and make sure I did not miss any questions. Obviously, if any of you are thinking of questions, feel free to just keep on sending them. I'm just making sure no one got skipped over. Okay, I got all the way up to the top. I didn't miss anything. Oh, here we go. Is there a game or MMO you'd like to make?
I'm actually super excited about Guild Wars 3, so I don't think there's anything else I don't want to do in terms of MMOs. But I have had a few ideas for other games outside of it. Especially when I was in college, I was working on a like top-down 2D action RPG. That didn't end up going anywhere, but I would love to revamp at least a similar idea somewhere along the line.
Okay. Actually, I got a question for you. So,
Yeah.
I know you've been playing Final Fantasy 14 for a while. So let's say, like somehow you get a call from a certain Japanese game company that's like, "Hey, you've worked on MMOs quite a bit. Would you like a chance to, do a little something?" Is there any particular like content or team that you'd be like, "Yo, sign me up, bro. Put me in team."
Honestly, no. I don't think I'd Guild like the ArenaNet team is treating me really well, and the game industry is genuinely in a very tough spot right now. So I don't think I'd really be willing to leave. But if for example they did like an exchange program or something, they're like, "Hey, we give you one of our devs for a month, and we get you for like a month." I think that'd be dope. That would be really cool. Especially there's so much to learn. Unfortunately, everything is for profit, so it's not profitable to teach your competitors how to do things that you do. But
Yeah.
if it was, that would be amazing, right? I would absolutely love to learn some stuff from their devs, and I'm sure there's some stuff that their devs can learn from us.
Question from Jason: what class role do you play in Guild Wars 2?
Mesmer all day, every day. It is just an amazing class. It's super fun.
And it needs buffs. That's what I heard.
It's
actually.
I don't speak on balance. Leave me out of balance, please.
Nah, bro. You gotta downplay your favorite thing. Your favorite thing is never good enough.
Exactly. No, you're right. Buff it. It needs to be OP. That's
Yeah.
what I'm looking for. But it's specifically Virtuoso for anyone who does play. I love Virtuoso.
All right. I just realized, Arya been out here plus one and everything you said. Like, all right, you like Final Fantasy, she like Final Fantasy. Y'all like the same classes. You might have to sign an autograph once you get out of here. Let me give it another minute or two to see if anyone else has any last minute questions before I close this out. Going once, going twice. All right. Seems like we're wrapping up. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining. As always, it is great to just see you all in here to talk to or hear from our speakers. Jerell, it was a lot of fun having you here. Every time I do one of these, it is cool. Just there's so much more things there is to learn from another developer, and also just the things that they're passionate about, and it your passion comes across with you talking about it. Cool, obviously you spend a lot of time working on MMOs, but it's very clear that you play a lot of MMOs in your time too, so your interest in how making sure these are fun experiences, it's apparent.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you guys for showing up so much. I really appreciate everybody coming. And thank you so much for asking me to talk. I had a great time chatting. I do like talking about game dev. So if folks see me around in here, I try to show up on Tuesdays. I'd love to chat with folks.
Yeah. If there's anything you want to if it's hey, there's this thing I'm super interested in, I've spent a lot of time digging into it, and maybe we reach out again about doing a future one. One thing I want to try in 2027 is doing a group panel of having multiple speakers. So if you happen to know of any black game developers who you all might want to collab on a panel, definitely reach out to me. And that seems like something I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would 100% be interested in that. Yeah, I could definitely reach out. Worst case scenario, it's a bunch of ANET people, but I can reach out to a fair few others as well.
Not Jerell though, because he didn't show up to your panel.
yeah. This is get back.
Exactly. We'll tell him it's going to be so great, and then not let him in.
Exactly. Just make him watch.
All right. So I am